Good morning, friends, and welcome. This lodge for the Washington, D.C. area here at 4865A Cordell Avenue in Bethesda, Maryland meets every Sunday at 11 o'clock to hear a presentation on a selected subject from the original teachings of the Masters of Wisdom as transmitted to us by H.P. Blavatsky and William Q. Judge. And today's talk is on Is Karma another word for fate? Next week's is on the three objects of the Theosophical movement. Our declaration, which is what we follow here at this lodge and the United Lodges of Theosophists throughout the world. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a true realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is the form signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with its declared purposes of this lodge as set forth in this declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. And again, those out there who are in the Washington, D.C. area are welcome to join us every Sunday at 11 o'clock. Today's reading will be from the Dhammapada, and that will be followed by the talk.
Chapter 2 of the Dhammapada, entitled Vigilance. Vigilance is the path to life eternal. Thoughtlessness is the path to death. The reflecting vigilant die not. The heedless are already dead. The wise distinctly understand this. Therefore they delight in wakeful watching. They graze in the pastures of the Aryas, the noble ones. Meditative, persevering, ever strenuous in endeavor, the tranquil ones attain nirvana, the highest freedom and happiness. Continually grows the glory of that man who is wakeful and mindful, whose deeds are pure, whose acts are deliberate, who is self-controlled, and who lives according to law. By endeavor, by vigilance, by discipline and self-control, let the wise man make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. Fools and witless persons give themselves to sloth. The wise value vigilance as their best treasure. Be not a sluggard, have no dalliance with lust and sense delights. He who meditates with earnestness attains great joy. When the prudent man overcomes sloth by vigilance, he ascends to the terrace of wisdom. Sorrowless, he surveys the sorrowful crowd. This wise man regards the foolish as the mountaineer from the high peak looks at those who are dwelling on the plains. Vigilant among the heedless, awake among the sleepy, the wise one forges ahead, even as a charger outdistances a weak horse. By vigilance did Indra rise to the lordship of the gods. Vigilance is always praised, heedlessness ever deprecated. A bhikkhu who delights in vigilance, who sees the danger of heedlessness, advances like a consuming fire, small or large. A bhikkhu who delights in vigilance, who sees the danger of heedlessness, will not fall. He is close upon nirvana. And now the talk.
Good morning. Today's talk is on the question, whether is karma another word for fate? First, to properly address this, I want to first address the first part of the question, which pertains to the term karma. So, what is karma? Karma, as it's defined according to the Theosophical glossary by Elena Petrovna, is defined as physically to pertaining to an action. Metaphysically, it's considered to be in reference to the law of retribution, the law of cause and effect, or ethical causation. Nemesis only in one sense, that of bad karma. In the 11th Nidana, in the concatenation of causes and effects in Orthodox Buddhism, yet it is the power that controls all things, the resultant of moral action, the metaphysical samsara, or the moral effect of an act committed for the attainment of something which gratifies a personal desire. There is the karma of merit and the karma of demerit. Karma neither punishes nor rewards. It is simply the one universal law which guides unerringly and, so to say, blindly all other laws productive of certain effects along the groups of the respective causations. When Buddhism teaches that karma is the moral kernel of any being, which alone survives death and continues in transmigration or reincarnation, it simply means that there remains not after each personality, but the causes produced by it, causes which are undying, as in which cannot be eliminated from the universe until replaced by their legitimate effects, and wiped out by them, so to speak. And such causes, unless compensated during the life of the person who produced them with adequate effects, will follow the reincarnated ego and reach in it its subsequent reincarnation until a harmony between effects and causes is fully re-established. No personality, a mere bundle of material atoms and of instinctual and mental characteristics, can of course continue as such in the world of pure spirit. Only that which is immortal in its very nature and divine in its essence, namely the ego, can exist forever, as it is that ego which chooses the personality it will inform after each devachan, and which receives through this personality the effect of the karmic causes produced. It is therefore the ego, the self, which in the moral kernel referred to an embodied karma, which alone survives death. Based on this reading, indeed, as mentioned, karma refers to the law of retribution, the law of cause and effect. Rather in the terms used in lay language among popular culture, there's the term "what comes around goes around." It could be considered a simplified version, as a way perhaps most people in humanity kind of try to grasp and understand this principle. As mentioned, this has been addressed in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in many different schools of thought, and it is associated to fate in the sense that it's considered, as stated in Christianity, what one reaps, what one harvests. One obtains what one set forth into action through previous actions. What we receive in the present is very commonly dependent on what we did in the past. That's what we receive in the present, which is why the two terms are considered to be quite interconnected. Now, it's not beyond the conceptualization I just gave. It's important to also consider karma from a bigger perspective, from a broader sense. For instance, there is what is considered. Actually, I'm gonna start. Individual karma, which pertains to, as I just explained, the way a person's actions extends repercussions that the person then has to deal with, be it positive or negative. But this pertains to this very single individual who's producing these actions. Beyond this, it could be considered for there to be, we could consider family karma, which pertains to causes and effects, but among members of their very own family. It is sometimes because one member of a family incurred in some actions. If that, for instance, that were to be the leader of the family, the head of the family, it's common that the children, the family, the partner, they will be associated to those actions, be it good or be it bad. Beyond family karma, here we have also the term racial, or could be considered cultural karma. That it's considered to represent again actions and causes and effects among members of a specific culture. And as I mentioned, there is a tendency for people to eventually associate or perhaps overgeneralize events or that have happened to members of a specific culture and then generalize to all of them. And this is viewed to also work in karma and in fate in this manner. Another term we see here is national karma. Analog to this refers to how members of a particular nation, a particular country, can again share karmic causes and effects, karmic actions and reactions, dependent on how perhaps some landmark individuals from that nationality have handled their actions and reactions, and how that can be generalized to the majority of the whole nation. And if I were to add another category, because as you can see, this goes from the microcosm to the macrocosm, we can add to this global karma. this refers to the extent all human beings on the planet share karmic responsibility to some extent in regards to the actions and reactions that have global implications, global repercussions. As can be seen, it's more complicated than the term of what comes around goes around. In terms of fate, one important thing important thing to consider is that a lot of these causes and effects, actions and reactions, may not necessarily be entirely reflective in a single lifetime. For instance, it is possible that an individual, some people I've heard saying, "Oh, I know of a certain person who did a lot of extremely aversive, evil, bad actions against others, and the person passed away and never had to suffer from any consequences." That may be the way we see it in this lifetime, but it's a law of retribution, and even if it extends to another lifetime, the person that person will have to deal with that. Maybe at a soul level, perhaps, if we were to call it by those terms. So that's part of why karma and fate are so interrelated. Why it could be considered to be another word for fate, which can extend beyond existences. And another thing we want to say is with karma, there is always a cause for any action. If it's very common to bring up a concept from the psychology world. There is a concept called the just world, which refers to the view that good things happen to good people when they do good things, and bad things happen to bad people when they do bad things. But this vision is very simplified, because indeed sometimes people feel they feel like victims of events due to them actually feeling confident that they do as much good as they possibly can, that they lead lives as exemplary as possible, yet they end up being the victims of robberies or the like. And the reason I bring this up is because according to this view, even though the person may indeed be doing a lot of good, the bad events, the aversive events that the person may be facing may indeed reflect karma that is being paid in current life due to past events from perhaps a previous existence. This is why it's so important to highlight that it's not just something pertaining to a single life. It can transcend, it can involve reincarnation and the like. This all as mentioned, this is a very elaborate concept. It's not as simple as that. In terms of fate, one thing that is important to note is that there is a lot of it. Sometimes there are individuals that say, "Oh, then they understand this as I'm predestined to suffer in modern day, in my current life, due to things I can't remember having done in a previous existence." That should not necessarily be the case. A view that could be considered with this is that with a lot of effort, we can all work hard to transcend whatever it may be that we may owe from a previous existence, through charity, through humanitarian work, through more attention to the further development of our spiritual life, and the like. In other words, it's very important for us to no matter what the circumstances may be that we are living, strive to become the best version that we can be of ourselves, to strive for perfection in as much as possible, and to strive to inspire others with good example. And little by little, as on an upside from this view, indeed, if we put in a lot of positive effort, positivity will likely go back in return into us. This is a very important view. One thing I want to highlight in popular culture, for instance, if the concept of the law of attraction has become very popular in recent years. So the way some people call the secret, and it's I believe it's a very positive outlook to promote. However, it's important to note that that law of attraction is also related to the law of karma and fate. In terms of that, it's definitely indeed to the best interest of any human being to try to have as positive thought as possible in their mind. Nonetheless, it's not merely developing the habit of positive thinking. It's good, but it's the start. One needs to apply action to then obtain positive reactions to that. I'll highlight that because it's something that I see commonly addressed in conversations pertaining to karma and fate. Law of attraction indeed is related to the law of retribution, but in both positive and negative ways, and it's up to us to try to devote our lives to the fullest we can to enable this to be on our upside, to help us improve our lives, attract positivity and harmony and peacefulness and prosperity to our lives in as much as possible, in a way that it transcends selfishness. It's not merely for us to feel happy with ourselves or prosperous with ourselves, but to have so that we can then give back more to those that surround us, to humanity in general, at large. These are some main views I wanted to address today. The term samkara, the way I see it written here, from what I've heard, refers to the wheel. The concept. It's important that I'll draw it in this way, but indeed there is cyclical. The existence is considered to be cyclical. Events are considered to go back and forth and return. We see this in life, in trends, in fashion, how something that perhaps was considered to be in fashion at a certain time point and is considered to be out of fashion later. You only need to give it years, maybe decades, but eventually a lot of things get back in fashion. Ideas that we think were popular at one time and could never become popular again, they become indeed popular again if you wait long enough, years, maybe decades. Same applies to karma, and it's very important for us. And one comment I want to mention is that the more we increase our consciousness of this, the more it can allow us to transcend let's say living what we consider dormant lives. The more we try, it's a Theosophy particularly, it's a school of thought that promotes increasing our consciousness of the way this impacts our lives, the way this permeates. The more conscious we are of our actions, the way we act upon them in life, the more we will be, the more that will enable us to apply the best principles to our every action. The more dormant that we are, or inattentive perhaps to consciousness about these principles, the more vulnerable we are getting at acting in ways that are not carefully thought after and have then yield us to deal with very adverse subsequent effects. In other words, as mentioned, it's really it's important for us to try to be more conscientious of that. Also, whenever we face any adversity in life, it can be of usefulness for us to promote introspection in ourselves, rather than merely saying, "Oh, why do I have to deal with this problem now?" it can help us in our lives if we ponder the question, in what way may I have contributed to now dealing with these adverse events? In what and what can I do to remediate that? What can I do to perhaps become to change that in as much as possible, or at minimum, do not make that mistake again. That is yet another principle, another aspect that Theosophy promotes on us, so that we can become better individuals in life. One other by doing so, I wanted to highlight that we can all transcend each and every one of these aspects of karma, which indeed apply to us. But by being more conscientious, we can try to turn this in our favor, in a way that can allow us to be more prosperous. I don't know if anyone in the audience has a question. If not, in the meantime, an important concept that also comes in relation to faith is that of free will. In Theosophy, it's considered that indeed we have the free will to transcend. We don't live, in other words, we don't live predetermined lives. Nonetheless, because of the causes and effects, the actions and reactions, there is a predisposition for already set in motion for us to deal with past consequences. It is through increasing our consciousness about this that we can indeed enact our free will to transcend that in that way. That's the way I would personally interpret what I have read about Theosophy in pertainance to this topic. It's important for me to also highlight some of the prominent individuals who have developed this in-depth analysis. Some of them include Robert Crosby and William Q. Judge, and of course Elena Petronila Blavatsky, on this topic, which is very extensive. We can discuss this to the end. As mentioned, it impacts. There's a lot of impact. We can see this emotion in life in general, in all forms of life, in animal life, plant life, in human life. We can see it in history. How many things repeat themselves. One important comment to highlight. One thing that's common among all empires is that they all rise and they all fall, and in many cases, to try to give like a spin on an application to this pertaining to the way empires or countries are governed, it's very common that a lot of countries are in the beginning they are risen through very positive leadership, and through that they tend to reach very periods of prosperity, but eventually it's common for decadence to come into many of these empires and many of these countries and cultures, and that can be highlighted in many by leaders that end up being elected that lead lives that are not admirable. We can mention Nero and Caligula in Rome, for instance. Though that tends to be a sign of decadence of an empire and a precursor to falls. Those are some ways to see how karma can act upon a culture or a nation, as an example. Global karma, for instance, if we were to give examples, right now we're seeing the phenomenon of global warming. In truth is to a very, and I don't want to sound like I'm trying to promote guilt, human, but we all, pretty much, I dare to say, almost every human being has been guilty at one point of throwing a gum to the sidewalk, or stepping on the grass, or to some degree. We all have had some role in contamination and pollution in the planet. And that subsequently now is leading us to what we see with global karma. I as recently as about a week ago, I remember hearing about the first hurricane ever hitting Ireland in Europe, where that's a region that has never had such kind of weather phenomena, and that's an effect we can see of global warming, which in turn has been related to problems in the ozone layer, which in turn is associated to aerosol and many gases that emanate from human creation devices. In other words, we all share to some extent global karma that is being paid and revealed in our modern existence. Nonetheless, to do not paint such a catastrophic point of view, what can we do? For instance, we can promote more recycling. The more we apply in our own individual life, the more that can impact all the way to our global karma in a positive way. That would be a way I could highlight the way, from a practical standpoint, that Theosophy promotes conscientiousness of karma and faith as a way to help us improve in our dealing with karma and in the way we handle ourselves in daily life. Yes, I'm going to now open the floor for questions.
Okay. I'm hearing all that, and I'm also relating to a statement, I believe, in The Voice, where it says that nature exists for humanity's development and all therein, and the karma idea of us, making mistakes and getting the opportunities to correct them and so forth. And speaking of opportunity, is it necessarily a situation where we did something wrong in the past because we have certain karma? Is it because we need growth potential or whatever? And does nature change as we deal with karma? Improve ourselves or deteriorate ourselves, as the case may be.
The way my understanding has been through the readings I've made, my answer to that would be that karma transcends this. It's more than this. Let's say the simplified version that if let's say someone punched a person, another person will punch this person, and simple cause reaction, simple as that. It's not really simple as that. And nature, I dare to say, serves as a platform to help, like as a school, to help people learn, to help us learn from our mistakes, as was mentioned. And sometimes the way things work may not be so clear cut and dry. Sometimes perhaps a person made a mistake that eventually life will put that person in a situation that will involve increasing consciousness and consideration of others due to that person not having been so considerate of others in the past. However, it may be for a completely different route than exactly or literally what that person did, or the dynamic that person went through. It may be different, but nature does work to facilitate these learning experiences, so we can at large become more conscientious and indeed change and prosper for the better. Tunjai.
There's a statement made, ye come out and ye be separate. So when you consider the global karma, now all nations and all people in all nations are involved in that karma. But many nations are still contributing to the global warming, saying that since United States and other more developed countries have had an opportunity to carry on with that process in the past, that now they should be given that same opportunity, and they're using coal and other polluting substances for that end in view. How then do we bring these nations who are not at all attuned to the global warming scenarios into accepting responsibility for what's going on around the world? Because if we pollute it, yes, the karma comes back to all of us, but there is a point that nature reaches when it will push backwards. In other words, our globe is an entity. It also grows from within out, as each human soul does, inside out. So when that point is reached, nature pushes it. Look at all these hurricanes and tsunamis and all these negative events that are occurring all around the world. It's a reaction to what we are doing to get that back towards us. So if we don't correct it, what is going to happen to land masses that are already sinking into the sea because of the rising water? These are real facts, but a lot of people don't consider it real because they don't have a direct experience of it. But a lot of other nations are having that direct experience.
I couldn't agree more. Those are very legitimate problems, and indeed, due to some countries having leaders that don't believe in global warming, making lenient decisions that are pretty much, oh, let's not cooperate because that's a hoax. Let's not believe, because that's happening. Some other entities, some other individuals are kind of becoming contagious with those ideas and saying, oh, we don't, let's put in less effort, or let's not cooperate with that. We don't need to. However, rather than pinpointing those individuals who indeed are doing no good to the planet, to the globe, to answer the question, what can we do? Unless someone in the tele audience happens to have a big leadership position in a country and can deal with the environmental agencies and world leaders that deal with this, those individuals perhaps can have an impact at large in that role. However, for members of the audience who lead, let's say, more traditional lives and are not really working with that, we can work with providing example to our neighbor by ourselves trying to avoid polluting our world in as much starting from our very own home, as big as it sounds, to advocating against and not purchasing products that further do damage to our country, to our planet, and if possible, working, let's say, with peaceful protests against anything that harms our planet. This can be accomplished even online. This can be accomplished in person. Little by little, the more voices that get together, the more noise they make, and the more likely they can be heard. And if as a majority slowly gets developed, eventually leaders have no choice but to comply to what the majority wants, which is the case in most democracies. So that starting little, we can end up accomplishing a lot. But first, we need to give that example to, at minimum, our neighbor, and hopefully our own community, hopefully our town, hopefully our country, hopefully eventually the world. That would be the way I would answer that question.
So, such things as fair trade agreements that are going on between industrialized nations with paying the proper price for goods from third world nations and so forth, fair trade. And so what you just said, that would apply, wouldn't that apply to this individual all the way up to just world karma like that? Is that what you?
Yes, definitely. It applies. I want to say another to add to that. It's very important for modern day democratic nations to value the privilege we have of elections. The right, not beyond a privilege. I'm saying this because even though we sometimes may be faced with tougher decisions, it's an exit on countries that deal with that are led by totalitarian dictatorships. There is no such thing, and if there is, sometimes they are rigged. And if we, it's important for us to become conscious of who are the people that are trying to run to become leaders in the towns, states, provinces, countries that we live in. So we can try as much as possible to choose individuals that actually are looking for the best interests in as much as possible, despite us being conscious that no one is perfect. Indeed, candidates can and may have made mistakes, will likely continue, will make more mistakes, but we always should try to choose leaders that represent our best interests for ourselves and for the planet. And that is another way to try to cooperate with, try to look after the best interests of our planet. That's one more way I could have. Yes.
In the original definition that you read, I think the word was used that karma acts blindly. Can you clarify that or expand on that? What is meant by karma acting blindly?
My personal interpretation of that, it's analog to the symbol for law, which involves a lady that represents justice, but she's blindfolded. It's the idea of justice being objective and fair, and is not biased. There's no two measurements for justice. On one example I can give for the law of gravity. If someone falls off a cliff, the law of gravity will not care if that person was moral or immoral, if that person did a lot of charity, if that person took away the lives of a lot of people. It's a law of gravity. Anyone who falls from a cliff will die, unless there is a mat or something. That's what's gonna. If there's no protection down, the person will die. And that's in that regard, karma applies to the rich, to the poor, to the youth, to the elderly, to the white, to the black, to the Latino, to the Asian, to the Hindu, to the Buddhist, to anyone. So to everyone, we it applies to all humans. That would be the way I see the blind concept. Yeah.
I didn't really have one formula.
Okay, you want me to? You kind of mentioned cycles throughout your talk,
Yes.
one way or the other. And if we're thinking about karma on an individual basis and the rises and our falls, I mean, you know, we are doing well sometimes, and sometimes we make a mistake or whatever the case may be, and we have a little downtime, you know, a fall, if you will. And that happens all throughout there. I guess my question is, on an individual basis, it's easier to relate, perhaps, if I did it in this lifetime anyway, something coming back to me. But as you move along to the family, the cultural, national, and so forth, it's more difficult to relate to that. Was it my karma to be born in the United States? Would that be my karma? Because of something that I needed to learn or something in the past?
Actually, I can.
Or something I needed to do to help my country?
I wanted to allude to that. Yeah, some people can have a perspective of karma as punishment. abominable ideas that I do not believe. I remember hearing once, and I want to highlight this as an example of what we in Theosophy do not believe. I remember one group where I heard that individuals who are born women are paying karma by being born as women. That is a horrible way. There's racist groups have the view that if someone is born into a race that they happen to consider inferior, that's karma. They're paying it by merely being born in a quote unquote inferior race. Those are abominable ideas, horrible ideas. One way to view karma would be the opposite, as in karma is an opportunity that's giving us to strive to our fullest. If someone is born in a culture or a country that's characterized by difficulties, that person, through conscientiousness, can work harder to improve, to try to improve the conditions of that person at an individual point of view, at a family level point of view, at a cultural point of view, and a national point of view. One person can make a big difference if indeed a lot of effort is put forth. So karma, my answer to that would be that karma is an opportunity for us. No matter where we are, whatever fate has decided to place us at, it's an opportunity for us to exert that impact, to help those at the location we have been placed at. Tunjai.
But just to add a little bit to that, each human being is a soul, and the soul, when it is re-entering into through reincarnation into the world again, views its life story, so to say. It has a purpose as to why it is coming, and in the philosophical sense, the soul is the one that chooses where to reincarnate, because it knows that that environment and the characteristics of family and the mother is going to give that soul the best opportunity to learn from. And so it isn't a punishment, as you made the statement, but it needs to be considered as the necessary step, as an opportunity for growth for the soul, even if the circumstances are very difficult that the soul chooses to come into that environment for.
Yes, I totally agree. It maybe could be seen as a necessary experience that can help us develop the character necessary to challenge, to indeed improve our quality of living of ourselves at an individual level, family level, cultural and national level, and eventually global level too.
But anything that a person experiences is his karma.
Yeah.
I mean,
Of course it is.
I mean, it looked to be unfair. There was a little kid who suffered. He was like 2 years old, 3 years old. He burned in the house, or his parents drowned him, or something like that. But that was, I mean, somebody looking at it from this life, they would say, "Oh, what did he do? He was only 2 or 3 years old. He's born and he has to suffer and die like that." But obviously, it was something from a prior life, probably.
True. Josh.
Yeah, returning briefly to a previous student's question about cycles, HPV says time is only an illusion produced by successive states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration. So with that in mind, and where Mr. Judge says karma is not subject to time, but we can know the effect based on the causes, we can calculate them because they're wrapped up together. Then he says that the effect is not succeedent to the cause. How do we incorporate those ideas with will, the ability to change our future?
How can we change our future? That's a very important question. I believe that I agree with the point of the addressing the proportion of things, a common disproportion I can highlight. some people can believe, let's say, if someone does something extremely bad, let's say vandalism to an entire school, just to give an example, and someone committed that, and then the person just simply says to the people responsible for the school, says, I'm sorry I did that, turns back and walks away. That does not really feel like a proper way to remediate the vandalism. If, on the contrary, let's say someone did vandalism on a school and then later says, I've come to develop an introspection and internalize and realize that what I did was incredibly wrong. I want to offer myself to volunteer to paint and cover up the graffiti the person put in there, to repair the damages to chairs, tables, or whatever is it that the person did. That's it. That in this simple example I'm giving, sounds like a more an effect that's more proportionate to remediate the wrong that was done. And in that regard, that just to mention, apology is always the first step. I'm not downplaying the actually, it's important for there to be introspection first in someone in regards to what the person did that was wrong, to become more considerate of the other people. That's a great step. And sometimes there are people that can be generous and accept apologies, and that's always welcome. A lot of people don't have it in their hearts to ever apologize for anything, which is a very mature way of handling things. If a person has mature enough to recognize and ask for apology, it helps even more if the person can try to offer to do something more than beyond an apology to help restore balance to the disharmony that was provoked to begin with. In light of that, because I was referencing the dealing in the present with things from the past, our future. If we wanna really transcend we wanna transcend our future by a wide margin, then that means we have to put in a lot of effort into a lot of investment into whatever is it that we want to see changed. That would be my in proportion, because it will not. Let's say if I were to take an example, but if someone were to, from an exercise point of view, someone were to do one push-up a day and expect to look like a bodybuilder by the next month or next year, that's just not realistic. Now, if someone says, I'm gonna do 100 push-ups every day, I can attest that if that habit is accomplished every single day, there will be some noticeable effects over the longer term. So likewise, that I believe can be applicable to all actions that we apply in the present into how they will likely yield effects in the future.
There is one example given, I think it's Mr. Judge, where it is stated that this doctor made an error and the baby was born deformed. And rather than accept responsibility for the deformity and help the family with the cost of raising that child, a lot of doctors ignore it and they don't accept responsibility for it.
Yeah.
So one way to mitigate that error is just like what you said, to accept responsibility for it and do what is necessary to offset the harm that was produced as a result of accident or not being able to do the right thing at the right time. So, but where the will comes into effect, it actually is the higher mind that has to be in charge, because the lower mind is always concerned with itself. It assumes a position of the total, does not allow the divine aspect of that human being to have any effect. So if we want to really change our future, then we have to learn to control the personality.
Yeah.
And the lower mind you were talking about transcendence, and that comes through meditation. Each day, if we slowly try to meditate as to how we can reach higher and higher levels of consciousness, then that takes effect. Well, slowly at first, but it's additive. Everything that we do adds to that effort, and in time, it will transcend the effort of the lower personality and be able to influx its own influence into the personality to change things for the better.
I agree. Could not agree more with your. Thank you for your contribution. Her.
Getting back to the question, is karma another word for fate? The example just given, is that would the short answer be yes? I mean, if you're trying to uplift yourself through meditation, then your fate then becomes in your hands. It shows us your fate is in your hands, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Eventually, you will uplift yourself if you persist in that.
Could not agree more. Persistence in a positive way is always the best way, the best antidote to stagnation and
Laziness.
and faithiness. Yeah. Could not agree more. Herb. Yeah.
Also, you mentioned the rises and falls. Well, religion is another thing too. We have a rise and a fall, and not to pick on any particular religion, but I happen to have been raised in a church. I often heard, every week I heard several times about forgiveness of sins. Is it possible, I mean, to get forgiven without doing anything, to just ask for it?
I actually I can on that topic I can highlight from Christianity in the famous incident where Mary Magdalene I believe it's Mary Magdalene is about to be stoned to death, and Jesus Christ proceeds to he interferes because people are accusing her of all the sins she has committed. And what Jesus Christ proceeds to do in this parable is that he writes in sand the sins of everyone that's holding stones. And it says that he who had no sin throw the first stone, and not because all of them are sinners. They all back off. But the ending of this is not that he tells the lady, for Mary Magdalene, like leave and sin no more. She's forgiven. She forgives her, but he does follow up by saying sin no more. He didn't tell her just leave and sin again. That message is very important because it's promoting introspection to you are being given a second chance in that regard. In regards to the specific question you asked
So I can go pray to somebody.
Can what?
To get forgiven.
The way I would see the forgiveness in many ways needs to be earned by introspection, right, and by commitment not to commit the same mistake again, trying as much as possible, and also to remediate it. It's more than merely saying I want to be forgiven. That's it. But
it gets back to the responsibility you mentioned.
Yes.
This is the doctrine of responsibility.
Accountability.
I'm responsible for what I do, and
of course,
I get the opportunities to maybe correct myself, but I have to do it myself.
But with the explanation that you gave on karma, I think you used the word disharmony.
Yes.
That if the person causes disharmony, then that disharmony will remain until that person harmonizes it.
Yes.
So in that way, the person might forgive you for your actions, but nature demands that you remove the effect that you caused as that action.
So the theosophical explanation to your comment about Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Jesus was a helper in this case. In terms of mitigating that, if you want to call it that. In other words, he he was a facilitator, like you or I could be a facilitator for each other for some kind of condition in life, and but we're still responsible for dealing with it.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. Yes, we are responsible for that. Yeah.
Many women have been stoned without Jesus to intervene. Was it their karma?
In that in regards to that part, that's it's a very complicated picture from the point of view of that there was no protector to them. Some women, there's many things to this. Like there are women who indeed committed the sins they're accused of and got stoned. Now on my end, I need to also question, should those laws have been implemented to begin with in the first place? Because to me they sound way too harsh to begin with.
So the larger question is, do we need a human civil justice system if karma is there? Do we need laws, crimes, punishments, court systems if we have karma?
In many ways, court systems considered to be could be considered to be like a human attempt to apply the same principles we talked about. That's the reason why policemen exist, to maintain law and order. Because otherwise, there could be anarchy in that regard, and it's a way at the microcosm for an attempt to maintain law and order in the way karma maintains it through the macrocosm.
But it's imperfect.
It's imperfect, of course, yeah, in that regard. And to answer that question, it's there's many, but an answer could be that there was some lesson to be learned from all the parties involved in those incidents, which could involve both women that were innocently that were actually innocent and were accused of something they didn't do, and for those the ones that actually did committed that, they had to for some reason karma decided that they needed to experience that. Now to begin, truth is from a global karma point of view, humanity. Truth is, there has been attempts for us to become more civilized, perhaps better, more humane laws rather than stoning. I personally don't think to begin with that adultery, for instance, it merits death by stoning. Now modern days law countries that are run by democracies do not have that law in place, and I agree with the abolishing of that law. It's good to see that indeed. Nonetheless, most religions actually do consider adultery to be a sin. However, they address it by the level of punishment that the level of in some religions they just promote the idea of more introspection. That varies across religions and across moral codes in humankind. But indeed, stoning is something I don't agree with. Yes.
I'm hearing all this, and I'm also reading that it's hard to see it. Karma is perfect justice.
Yeah.
So anything that we suffer,
we only see, we never really see the truth. We see a relative truth. So we're talking about relative stuff here. In the end, karma is perfect justice.
Yeah.
The way I read it.
It can be known, though,
Yeah.
by those who know the ultimate divisions of time.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It could be in a way that ourselves we just do not understand. Could transcend. As that old saying goes, that the Lord works in mysterious ways. It can be like that. One thing I wanted to mention from Christianity too. There's a famous story I've heard many times about a woman coming to a priest to confess the sin of gossip, that she tarnished the reputation of several people, and as she asked for, how can I be forgiven? And the answer from the priest is to take a pillow, go to the highest tower in the town and open it and shake it, and to then come back a week later to tell the priest what happened. The person said that she did that, and that all the feathers were blown by the wind in completely different directions. Then the priest tells her, now go back and pick every single feather. And she's like, that's absolutely impossible. The wind already propagated it. There's no way to track it, no way. And he says, that's the level of impossibility of restoring now the reputation of all the people you have tarnished. And it's I'm not saying that I believe there's unforgivable sins. There's things we can do to improve our lives, but we need to be conscious of the level of damage we can cause in other people.
We're talking forgivable. Is there any such thing as forgiveness? If there is, why should I be? Then why is karma fate?
I believe rather the term forgiveness, unforgiveness could be better.
Well, I can forgive you for whatever you did, but you already did it, so you know, you've done it, or I've done it. Okay, it's out there. We can try to mitigate it.
You mediate it.
But
Yeah,
you know,
I think it's just more of but the way I would interpret it is more of forgiveness. And forgiveness is more of the dealing between the perpetrator and the victim on the level of agreement that harmony has been restored.
harmony.
That would be maybe a better way, another way to understand how that dynamic flows and how much effort is placed to restore it. The level of if enough effort is placed into restoring the harmony, that can be considered to be an enabler of people being at a state where the victim can consider this person to be forgiven.
So keywords here are responsibility, harmony. Two keywords I just heard.
Responsibility, harmony.
Yeah. Restoring harmony. That's what karma does. And it puts responsibility on the individual and the nation and so forth.
Yeah.
To restore harmony.
I'll make a comment.
Sure.
Sometimes when events happen, people get stuck in that mode. And this person did that to me, and that person did this to me. And I think when the forgiveness is exerted, you're also freeing yourself from that bondage. The event that took place is there, okay? If it caused disharmony, that the originator of this disharmony has to cause restitution to it. In other words, law, which is karma, does not have that word in it. Forgiveness.
Yes.
The forgiveness is a human quality.
Yes.
Saying that you made an error, but here's whereas the law says here's an opportunity for you to remedy your action, because it gives you an opportunity to remedy it. It's not like you've done it and you're going to be responsible for the rest of it. And you're responsible until you harmonize it, the action-reaction process. But the forgiveness is taking place between individuals, because if you get stuck in that mode and you're saying, well, I'm going to get you, that's vindictiveness. It does not have any place in this kind of philosophy, because forgiveness is that you are willing to give that person an opportunity to put it right. Does not mean that the event has disappeared.
Yeah, exactly. It's an opportunity to make a difference.
Right.
In as much as possible. Yeah, to make it right. Yeah.
It sounds like we're all coming to the conclusion that forgiveness is sort of a social transaction among people.
Yes.
And that it can be, in that way, a gateway towards just psychologically detaching from the circumstances of a situation and
Yes.
moving forward in a more introspective way, as you pointed out.
Yes.
There's another sort of aspect to it, which is that I've heard the phrase, in order to forgive, you must first have blamed. And that in and of itself is a social transaction too, to blame someone for something. And the student thinks of the Mahatmas when they regard our little lives. They certainly don't blame us for our sins. They don't blame us for our missteps. They don't blame us for whatever it might be. They understand, as we in our higher nature must understand, that these are just the products of the ignorance of the lower nature. And so, just in the way that the Mahatmas aren't blaming us for these things, they're also not forgiving us for these things, right? There's no reason to forgive us for something that they haven't blamed us for.
Yeah.
They are impassive to these things, as we in our higher nature should be impassive to these things in others. So,
Yes.
Without getting too caught up in the blame forgiveness cycle, we can take the position of the higher nature, observe all of these things as just the manifestation of a karmic life, or the the karmic circumstances of a manifested life, and try to take it to a higher level. The reading, in fact, this morning mentioned this briefly in a more kind of general way. It says, "The wise man regards the foolish as the mountaineer from his high peak looks at those who are dwelling on the plains." So that person who's risen to the peak and has that perspective where there's all this activity going on in the plains, but that having a higher perspective doesn't really encourage this person blamed that person forgave that person, and this person committed this sin against that person. It's all much in the details of the lower nature. So I thought it was interesting that it sort of echoed the reading from this one.
Definitely, no, I admire the Dhammapada big time. It's an amazing reflection on these topics. Could not agree more. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to be concluding today's talk. We again want to highlight that this presentation and many others from the Bethesda, Maryland Lodge of the United Lodge of Theosophy can be found online in YouTube for the channel you're watching this presentation. You're welcome to watch this and all the others. We also encourage those who can actually attend these meetings in person to indeed come here on every Sunday at 11 in the morning, from 11 to 12, and also from 12:15 to 1:15 every other Sunday of every first and third Sunday of the month, for group discussions of the key of Theosophy. Thank you, everyone, and may all of you enjoy your day.